The massive space station Azure Heights floated like a jewel in the darkness of space. Its crystal walls caught the light from distant stars and threw rainbow colors across the void. Inside the station, beings from across the galaxy walked through, halls made of rare metals and precious stones. Tonight was special. Tonight was Victor Kane's annual charity gala. Maya Rodriguez carried a silver tray filled with expensive drinks through the crowded ballroom. Her black uniform was clean and pressed, but she felt small among the towering aliens and wealthy humans who filled the room. She had been working on Azure Heights for 8 months now. The job paid well, but every day was hard. The rich guests treated her like she was invisible, or worse, like she was something dirty they had to tolerate. Maya needed this job. Back on Earth, her little brother Alex was sick with a disease that attacked his nervous system. The treatments cost more money than her family had ever seen. Working on this fancy space station was the only way she could make enough to pay for his medicine. Every credit she earned went straight to the hospital bills. Victor Kane stood at the center of the room like a king holding court. He was tall and handsome in an expensive suit that probably cost more than Maya made in a year. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and his smile was bright and false. Kane owned mining operations on 12 different planets. He had more money than most small governments. Tonight, he was showing off for his alien friends. Maya watched him laugh with Ambassador Zektar, a creature that looked like a giant snake with arms. The Cytherian's scales were deep purple, and his yellow eyes never blinked. Next to them stood Trade Minister Quillathan, whose body was made of living crystal that chimed softly when he moved. These were some of the most powerful beings in the known galaxy, and they were here because Victor Kane wanted to impress them. "More wine over here," called a voice. Maya turned to see a group of Centaurian businessmen waving empty glasses. They had forearms each and skin like polished metal. Maya hurried over with her tray. "About time," one of them said in perfect English. "Do you humans always move so slowly?" Maya bit her tongue and poured their drinks. She had learned not to respond to insults. It only made things worse. The Centaurians took their glasses without saying thank you and turned away from her like she had already disappeared. She moved through the crowd, filling glasses and clearing empty plates. The conversations around her were about trade deals worth billions of credits, wars on distant planets, and political marriages between alien royalty. These beings controlled the fate of entire worlds, and Maya was just a servant bringing them drinks. In the corner of the ballroom sat an old piano. It was made of real wood from Earth, a rare and expensive thing this far from home. Victor Kane had bought it for decoration, something to show his guests how rich he was. The piano was beautiful, with carved legs and ivory keys that gleamed under the lights. Maya had noticed it on her first day working here. She knew how to play, but she had never dared to touch it. Maya had studied music at the university on Earth before her brother got sick. She had dreamed of being a composer, of writing songs that would make people feel something real. But dreams did not pay for medical treatments. Dreams did not keep little brothers alive. "You there, girl?" a loud voice called out. Maya looked up to see Victor Kane pointing at her. The conversations around him had stopped. All eyes were on her now. "Come here." Maya's heart started beating faster. She walked over to where Kane stood with his group of alien friends. Up close, she could smell the expensive alcohol on his breath. His eyes were bright with the kind of confidence that came from too much wine and too much power. "Ladies and gentlemen," Kane said, his voice carrying across the room, "I want to show you something special tonight. This piano here is from Earth. It's over 200 years old, and we happen to have a real human here who can play it for us." Maya felt her face go hot. "Sir, I'm working right now. I need to serve the other guests." Kane's smile turned cold. "I'm not asking you. I'm telling you. Play something for my friends. They want to see how humans make music." Around them, more guests had stopped talking to watch. Maya could feel their eyes on her like weights. Some looked curious, others looked amused, like they were about to watch a funny show. Ambassador Zektar's yellow eyes glittered with interest. Trade Minister Quillathan's crystal body hummed softly. "I really should get back to work," Maya said quietly. She needed this job. She could not afford to make Kane angry, but she also knew that once she sat down at that piano, she would become entertainment instead of a person. She would be performing like a trained animal for the amusement of beings who already thought humans were beneath them. Kane stepped closer to her. His voice dropped low so only she could hear. "Listen carefully, girl. You work for me. That means you do what I say when I say it. Now sit down at that piano and play, or find yourself looking for a new job tomorrow, and good luck finding one that pays enough for your brother's treatments." Maya's blood turned to ice. Kane knew about Alex. Of course he did. Rich men like him made it their business to know everything about the people who worked for them. It gave them power, and power was what men like Kane lived for. She looked around the room one more time. The other human staff members watched her with sympathy, but they could not help. They had their own families to feed, their own reasons for needing these jobs. The alien guests waited with the patience of predators watching prey. Maya walked to the piano. Maya sat down on the piano bench and felt the smooth wood under her fingers. The keys were cold and perfect, each one polished until it shone. She had not played piano in over a year, not since she left Earth to work on this station. Her hands shook slightly as she placed them over the keys. "Well, what are you waiting for?" Victor Kane asked loudly. "Play something. My guests are waiting." The crowd pressed closer around the piano. Maya could smell their expensive perfumes and see their jeweled clothes. Ambassador Zektar slithered closer, his purple scales catching the light. His yellow eyes stared at Maya like she was an interesting bug. Trade Minister Quillathon's crystal body made soft ringing sounds as he moved. "What kind of music do humans play?" asked a voice from the crowd. It belonged to Lady Vexana, a creature with blue skin and silver hair who owned shipping companies across 3 star systems. "Is it as simple as the rest of your culture?" Some of the guests laughed. Maya felt her cheeks burn with shame, but she pressed down on the keys and began to play a simple classical piece she remembered from her lessons. It was Bach, something safe and familiar. Her fingers found the melody even though her heart was racing. "Boring," Kane said after just a few bars. "Play something with more energy, something that shows these fine people what Earth music is really like." Maya switched to a livelier piece, but her playing was stiff and nervous. She could hear the conversation starting up around her as the guests lost interest. They treated her music like background noise, something to ignore while they talked about more important things. "The human plays adequately," she heard Ambassador Zektar say to Kane, "though their musical development is quite primitive compared to Cytherian compositions. Our songs tell stories that span thousands of years." "Of course," Kane replied, his voice full of false respect. "Humans are still learning. We're the youngest species in the galactic community, after all. We barely left our own planet a few decades ago." Maya's fingers stumbled on the keys. She tried to keep playing, but their words cut into her like knives. Around her, the conversations continued as if she was not even there. "I heard humans only discovered faster than light travel by accident," said another voice. This came from Commander Thax, a military officer whose people looked like walking trees made of metal. They were trying to build a better weapon and stumbled onto space folding instead. More laughter rippled through the crowd. Maya played faster, trying to drown out their voices, but she could still hear every word. "Such a young species," agreed Trade Minister Quillathon. His crystal voice sounded like wind chimes. "They have no real art, no deep culture. Everything they create is shallow and temporary." "Play something different," Kane interrupted Maya's playing again. "Something more exotic. Show them some real human emotion." Maya switched to a jazz piece she had learned in college, but her heart was not in it. Every note felt forced and false. She was not playing music anymore. She was performing tricks for an audience that saw her as nothing more than a curiosity. "Look at her fingers move," said Lady Vexana with amusement. "Like a little machine. Do all humans learn to copy music this way, or just the servant class?" The insult hit Maya like a physical blow. She was not copying music. She had written her own compositions once. She had dreams and talent and a mind that could create beautiful things. But these beings saw her only as a poor human girl who worked for their entertainment. "Play louder," Kane commanded. "Some of my guests can't hear you over their conversation." Maya pressed the keys harder, but it only made the music sound angry and harsh. Her technique was getting sloppy as her emotions took over. She could hear herself making mistakes, and that made everything worse. "Perhaps we should let the child return to her serving duties," suggested Ambassador Zektar. "This display has been educational, like Maya was a museum exhibit or a science experiment, like her music and her humanity were just objects to be studied and dismissed." "Not yet," Kane said with a cruel smile. "I paid good money for that piano and I want to get some use out of it. Keep playing, girl. My guests are enjoying themselves." But they were not enjoying the music. They were enjoying the power they had over her. Maya could see it in their faces and hear it in their voices. She was trapped here, forced to perform, while they made jokes about her people and her planet. A Rigelian merchant with 6 arms pointed at Maya and said something in his own language that made the other aliens laugh. Maya did not understand the words, but she understood the tone. They were mocking her. Her fingers moved over the keys automatically now, playing songs she had learned years ago while her mind screamed with frustration. She thought about her brother, Alex, lying in a hospital bed on Earth, depending on her to pay for his treatments. She thought about her parents working double shifts to help with the bills. She thought about all the dreams she had given up to be here. The guests around the piano continued their conversations about business and politics. Maya was background music to them, no more important than the air they breathed. She kept playing because she had no choice, but inside she was breaking apart piece by piece. "Enough," Kane finally said after what felt like hours, but had probably been only 20 minutes. "I think that's sufficient demonstration of human musical abilities." The dismissal in his voice was clear. Maya was being told she could stop now, like a trained pet who had performed long enough. The guests were already moving away, returning to their important conversations and expensive drinks. Maya's hands fell from the keys. The silence that followed felt heavier than the music had been. Maya sat in the sudden silence, her hands resting on the piano keys. The guests were walking away from her, returning to their drinks and conversations. She could hear them laughing about something else now, already forgetting she existed. Victor, Kane was telling a story about his latest mining operation to Ambassador Zektar. Something hot and angry was building in Maya's chest. She thought about her brother Alex in his hospital bed, fighting for his life while she sat here being treated like a trained animal. She thought about her parents working themselves to exhaustion to help pay his medical bills. She thought about all the music she had stopped writing, all the dreams she had put aside to take this job. These aliens thought humans had no real culture. They thought Earth was just a young planet full of simple people who copied other species instead of creating anything original. They saw her as entertainment, a curiosity to laugh at and dismiss. Maya's fingers touched the keys again, but this time she did not play what Victor Kane wanted. She did not play what the alien guests expected. Instead, she began to play something that came from deep inside her heart. The melody started soft and low like a whisper in the darkness. It was her own composition, something she had written years ago when she first learned about the galaxy beyond Earth. She had called it Children of the Blue World, because that was how she thought of humanity, young beings from a small blue planet, trying to find their place among the stars. The first notes were sad and lonely, telling the story of a species that had spent most of its history looking up at the night sky and wondering if they were alone. Maya played the fear and hope that had driven humans to reach beyond their world, even when they had no idea what they would find out there. A few guests noticed the change in her playing. The melody was different now, more complex and personal. It was not background music anymore. It demanded attention. Maya's fingers moved faster, building the song into something stronger. She played the struggles of humanity, the wars they had fought, the disasters they had survived, the times they had failed and gotten back up again. Each note carried the weight of human history, from the first cave paintings to the first steps on the moon to the first journey to another star. Ambassador Zektar stopped talking to Victor Kane. His yellow eyes turned toward the piano, drawn by the unusual harmonies Maya was creating. The music was not like anything he had heard before, but there was something familiar in it too. Something that spoke to experiences his own people had lived through long ago. More guests were turning to listen now. Trade Minister Quilithon's crystal body began to resonate with the music, creating soft chiming sounds that actually improved Maya's composition. Lady Vexana stopped her conversation with the Rigelian merchants and moved closer to the piano. Maya played the story of humanity's first contact with alien species. She played the fear and excitement of realizing they were not alone in the universe. She played the wonder of seeing new worlds and meeting beings they could never have imagined. But she also played the pain of being treated as the youngest and least important species in the galaxy. The music grew more complex as Maya wove together different musical traditions from Earth. She used jazz harmonies and classical structures, folk melodies and modern rhythms. But she also began to include mathematical patterns that she had learned existed in the music of other species. The Cytherians used certain scales that reflected the physics of their homeworld. The vegans created crystal harmonies based on the resonance frequencies of their bodies. Maya took these alien elements and made them part of her human song. She showed how humanity could learn from other species without losing what made them unique. She proved that being young did not mean being simple or shallow. The conversations in the ballroom were stopping as more and more guests turned to listen. The music Maya was playing was sophisticated in ways they had not expected. It showed knowledge of galactic musical traditions, but it used them to tell a uniquely human story. Commander Thax, the tree-like military officer who had mocked human culture earlier, found himself moving closer to the piano. The rhythms Maya was using reminded him of the war songs his people had sung when they were still a young species, fighting for survival on their harsh world. Maya played the loneliness of being far from home, working jobs that paid well but cost pieces of your soul. She played the love that drove people to sacrifice their dreams for their families. She played the strength that came from being underestimated and dismissed. The melody reached a point where it seemed to hang in the air, balanced between hope and despair. Maya thought about all the times she had been told that humans were too young, too simple, too primitive to understand the deeper things in life. She thought about how these same beings were now listening to her music with growing respect and recognition. She began to play the future she dreamed of, not just for herself but for all humanity. A future where humans were not seen as children playing with dangerous toys, but as equals who brought their own gifts to the galactic community. She played the beauty that came from struggle, the wisdom that grew from making mistakes and learning from them. The music built to a crescendo that filled the entire ballroom. Maya's hands moved over the keys with confidence and power, creating sounds that made the aliens around her remember their own species' journeys from primitive beginnings to galactic importance. Victor Kane stood frozen, his mouth slightly open. He had expected simple entertainment, but instead he was hearing something that challenged everything he thought he knew about human capabilities. Maya played the final phrases of her composition, letting the melody climb toward something that sounded like hope mixed with determination. She was not asking for pity or approval. She was stating a truth about humanity that could not be denied or dismissed. The last note hung in the air like a challenge, daring anyone to call it simple or primitive. The last note of Maya's song faded into silence, but the silence was different now. It was not empty or dismissive like before. It was the kind of silence that came when people needed time to understand what they had just heard. Ambassador Zektar's yellow eyes were wide with something that looked like surprise. As a Cytherian, he had been raised on the ancient serpent songs that told the history of his people's rise from primitive hunters to masters of space travel. The melodies Maya had just played contained echoes of those same songs, but she had woven them into something entirely new. "How did you know?" he asked quietly, his voice carrying across the now silent ballroom. "How did you know about the harmony of ascension?" Maya looked up from the piano, confused. "I don't know what that is." "The musical pattern you used in the middle section," Zektar explained, moving closer to the piano. "It follows the same mathematical structure as our most sacred songs, the ones that tell of our journey from our home caves to the stars. Trade Minister Quillathan's crystal body was humming softly, creating harmonies that had not been there during Maya's performance. She used our resonance frequencies too, he said in wonder. The natural vibrations of our crystal matrices. But how is this possible? Humans have only been in space for a few decades. Maya felt a flush of pride mixed with fear. She had not stolen their music. She had learned about different species' musical traditions during her studies at university, before her brother got sick and she had to leave school. She had always been fascinated by how mathematics appeared in all forms of music, regardless of which species created it. I studied comparative music theory, Maya said simply. I learned that all intelligent species seem to discover the same mathematical relationships in sound. The patterns that make music beautiful are based on physics and mathematics that exist everywhere in the universe. Lady Vexana stepped forward, her blue skin seeming to glow in the soft light. You mean you understand that music is not just random noise but follows universal laws? Yes, Maya replied. Every species finds beauty in the same mathematical ratios, the same harmonic progressions. We just express them differently because we have different voices, different instruments, different experiences. Commander Thax made a sound that was his species' equivalent of laughter, but it was not mocking this time. It was amazed. The young human understands something that took my people centuries to discover. Music is the language of the universe itself. Around the piano, more aliens were gathering. Word was spreading through the ballroom that something extraordinary was happening. These were beings who had lived for centuries, who had studied music and art across dozens of worlds. They were recognizing something in Maya's composition that went beyond simple entertainment. Play it again, requested Ambassador Zektar. Please. I want to hear how you connected our serpent songs to your human melodies. Maya placed her hands on the keys again, but this time she was not performing for an audience that saw her as inferior. She was sharing her music with beings who understood its complexity and beauty. She played Children of the Blue World again, but this time she explained as she went. This section here, she said as her fingers moved through a complex harmony, I based it on the mathematical ratios I learned exist in Cytherian music, but I combined it with human jazz progressions to show how two different species can find the same truths through different paths. Zektar's head swayed slightly as he listened, a sign of deep appreciation in his culture. You have created a bridge between our worlds, he said. This is not copying or imitation. This is translation of the highest order. Maya continued playing, pointing out how she had incorporated elements from multiple alien musical traditions. She had used vegan crystal harmonics to represent the clarity of truth. She had borrowed Centaurian rhythmic patterns to show the complexity of galactic civilization. She had even included subtle references to Rigelian percussion techniques to represent the diversity of life in the universe. But throughout it all, the heart of the song remained human. It told the story of a young species learning to find its place among older, more established civilizations. It spoke of the courage required to leave home and venture into the unknown. It expressed the pain of being misunderstood and the joy of finally being recognized for who you really are. This is not primitive music, Trade Minister Quillathan announced to the crowd. This demonstrates a level of cultural sophistication that rivals species with thousands of years of galactic experience. Victor Kane stood at the edge of the crowd, his face pale and confused. He had expected to humiliate Maya and entertain his guests with a display of human simplicity. Instead, he was watching those same guests treat her with the kind of respect they usually reserved for master artists and cultural ambassadors. I don't understand, Kane said loudly, trying to regain control of the situation. It's just a song, she's just a waitress. Ambassador Zektar turned to look at Kane with cold yellow eyes. She is an artist who has created something that bridges the gap between species. She has shown us that your people possess depths we had not recognized. Moreover, added Lady Vexana, she has done this while working as a servant to pay for her family's medical expenses. She has created beauty while enduring hardship. That is the mark of a truly advanced being. Other human staff members who had been watching from the edges of the room stood a little taller. They had heard their species defended and elevated by some of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Maya's music had not just impressed the aliens. It had changed how they saw humanity itself. Maya finished playing and lifted her hands from the keys. The aliens around her began to make sounds of appreciation in their various languages. Some clapped, others chimed, still others made low humming noises that indicated deep respect. "What is the name of this composition?" asked Commander Thax. "Children of the Blue World," Maya replied. "It's about growing up and finding your place in something bigger than yourself." The title seemed to resonate with the alien guests. They understood what it meant to be young in a universe full of ancient civilizations. They remembered their own species' early struggles to prove themselves worthy of respect. The applause gradually faded, but the respect in the aliens' eyes remained bright and clear. Maya sat at the piano, hardly believing what had just happened. Less than an hour ago, these same beings had been laughing at her and treating her like a trained animal. Now they were looking at her like she had just shown them something precious and rare. Ambassador Zektar approached the piano bench where Maya sat. His movement was slow and formal, the way Cytherians moved when they wanted to show deep respect. He stopped just in front of the piano and lowered his serpentine head in what Maya recognized as a bow. "Maya Rodriguez," he said, speaking her name carefully in his accented English. "That is your name, yes? I wish to know the name of the artist who created this bridge between worlds." "Yes, sir," Maya replied, still not quite believing this was real. "That's my name. I have a question for you, Maya Rodriguez," Zektar continued. "Would you consider coming to the Cytherian Cultural Council as our guest artist? We would pay you well to teach our musicians about human musical traditions and to learn more of our own." Maya's heart jumped. The Cytherian Cultural Council was one of the most prestigious artistic institutions in the galaxy. Being invited there was an honor that most musicians could only dream of. Before she could answer, Trade Minister Quilathan stepped forward. His crystal body chimed softly as he moved. "I must make a competing offer," he said with what passed for humor among his species. "The Vegan Resonance Academy would be honored to host you as a visiting composer. Your understanding of universal harmonic principles is exactly what our students need to learn." "Wait," called Lady Vexana from across the small crowd. "The Blue Star Shipping Company has been looking for a cultural ambassador to help us understand the species we trade with. Maya, your music shows you understand how to connect different cultures. The job pays extremely well and would let you travel across the galaxy." More offers came from around the room. Commander Thax invited her to compose ceremonial music for his people's military ceremonies. A Rigelian merchant wanted to hire her to create music for interspecies trade negotiations. Even some of the wealthy human guests were approaching with offers to sponsor her musical career. Maya looked around at all these powerful beings competing for her attention and talent. It felt like a dream, but a dream that was actually happening. Then she remembered something important. "I need to ask about the other human staff here," she said clearly. "They're good people who work hard. If I leave, will you make sure they're treated with respect?" Ambassador Zektar's yellow eyes brightened with what might have been approval. A true artist thinks of others before herself. "Yes, I believe arrangements can be made. Perhaps some of them would be interested in cultural exchange programs as well." Maya looked toward the edges of the ballroom where her fellow human workers were watching. She saw hope in their faces, the same hope she felt rising in her own chest. Her music had not just changed how the aliens saw her, it had changed how they saw all humans. "There's one more thing," Maya said, standing up from the piano bench. "I have a brother on Earth who's very sick. His medical treatments cost a lot of money. Whatever job I take, I need to be able to pay for his care." "Medical expenses will not be a problem," Quilathan assured her. "Any position worthy of your talents will pay far more than you need. In fact, vegan medical technology might be able to help your brother in ways Earth medicine cannot." Victor Kane had been standing at the edge of the crowd, watching his carefully planned evening fall apart around him. His alien guests were no longer impressed by his wealth or his power. Instead, they were competing to hire away his serving staff and treating them with more respect than they had ever shown him. Kane stepped forward, his face red with anger and embarrassment. "Now wait just a minute," he said loudly. "Maya works for me, she has a contract, you can't just steal my employees." The conversation around the piano stopped. Ambassador Zektar slowly turned to look at Kane, and his expression was not friendly. "Your employee?" Zektar asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "You forced her to perform against her will. You threatened her job when she hesitated. You treated her like property for your guests' amusement. And now you claim to own her talents?" "She's under contract," Kane insisted, but his voice was weaker now. "I have legal rights." "Your legal rights," said Lady Vexana coldly, "do not include forcing people to perform for your entertainment or threatening their livelihood when they show dignity. What you did tonight was not leadership. It was bullying." Commander Thack stepped closer to Kane, his metal tree-like form towering over the human billionaire. "On my world, we have a saying. A leader who must force respect has no right to lead. You have shown us what kind of man you are." Trade Minister Quillethan's crystal body rang with harsh, discordant notes that indicated displeasure. "The Vegan Trade Federation will be reconsidering our business relationships with Kane mining operations. We prefer to work with beings who show honor and respect for all sentient life." Maya watched as the most powerful beings in the galaxy turned, their backs on Victor Kane. His wealth and influence meant nothing to them now. They had seen him reveal his true character, and they found it lacking. "I quit," Maya said simply, looking directly at Kane. "I'll work out whatever legal requirements I have to, but I won't be your employee anymore." Kane opened his mouth to argue, but no words came out. Around him, his alien guests were already making plans to leave his party early. Several were discussing how to help Maya and the other human staff find better positions. His attempt to humiliate humanity had instead elevated them and destroyed his own reputation. Maya turned back to the aliens who had offered her positions. "I'll need some time to think about all your generous offers," she said. "But first, I want to go home to Earth and see my brother. I want to tell him that his big sister is going to be able to pay for his treatments and that humans are finally getting the respect we deserve." Ambassador Zektar nodded approvingly. "Family first. This is another sign of advanced civilization. Take all the time you need. Our offers will remain open." As the evening wound down, Maya found herself surrounded by beings who wanted to discuss music and culture with her as an equal. The piano that had been a tool for her humiliation had become the instrument of her triumph. Outside the great windows of Azure Heights, the stars shone with the same light they always had. But somehow, they looked different to Maya now. They no longer seemed cold and distant. They looked like destinations, places where her music and her people would be welcomed and respected. She was no longer just a waitress trying to pay her brother's medical bills. She was Maya Rodriguez, composer of Children of the Blue World, the human who had taught the galaxy that young did not mean simple, and that wisdom could come from unexpected places. The future stretched out before her, like a song waiting to be written, full of possibilities she had never dared to imagine.